All right. All right. Welcome, everybody, to Club Med Virtual. We're here joined by Christopher Ramus. He's a first-year student at Oakland University, William Beaumont School of Medicine, and he's here to answer your guys' questions. Sorry, my video turned off. And yeah, Chris, if you want to introduce yourself, go ahead. And if you have a presentation, go ahead with that. And thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Like Peter said, I am Chris Ramus, first year at OUWB Medical School. And I'm just going to share my screen and get right into my presentation. Just going to be talking a bit about my application process, my timeline, and then what it was like being in medical school now and starting. So we'll just go right into it here. All right. So just to start off a little bit, for my undergraduate journey, just to give you a little background about myself, for my academics, I studied at WSU for 5 years. I was a biological sciences major with a poli-sci minor. And during that time, I also took some classes at University of Michigan for Air Force ROTC, that's the Reserve Officers Training Corps. So if people have questions later on about what it's like being an ROTC student as well as a pre-med student and how that factors into my journey, they can ask those questions later on as well. But just to go into some of the experiences I put on my actual medical school application, I was a teaching assistant at Wayne State, specifically for human physiology. It was probably one of my favorite subjects at school that I learned from that I thought was very directly applicable to medical school, and it really has been. So that's something that was kind of really on the forefront of my application, especially since my focus is kind of in education. That's kind of how my background is. And I also want to use that for the future. So I'm definitely interested in applying educational background to my future as a clinician as well. Moving on, I also, like I mentioned earlier, I did Air Force ROTC at University of Michigan, and that's a 4-year program that traditionally students go through, and at the end they commission as officers in the United States military in one of the various branches. I did not complete that program because I decided to transition into preparing for medical school full time and getting ready to apply. So, but that was a major part of my journey. So I also put that on my application as well. And I had some teaching background through that program as well. I was and still am a clinical intern at, it's called the Health Unit on Davison Avenue, better known as the Huda Clinic in downtown Detroit. And we serve at the clinic uninsured and underinsured patients of all backgrounds. And it's a free clinic for patients to come and get a variety of different medical services, everything from basic primary care to mental health, optometry, and then we do have a few other specialty services that come in infrequently, like endocrinology or podiatry. Moving on down a little bit here, I also have worked for a couple of years as a standardized patient at the University of Michigan's School of Nursing. I got into that. I actually knew some people through my ROTC program that were doing that. They were also interested in healthcare, and I decided to pursue that. And it's pretty relevant being a standardized patient because in that role, you act as a patient and you are training other medical, or in this case, nursing students, how to interact with patients and how to have a good clinical conversation, but then also build rapport with the patient and have a good overall visit that's positive for the patient. So it's a good way for schools in the healthcare fields to assess students on how they can interact with the patients through various interpersonal kind of scenarios that they set up. So that's something that is relevant for anyone who wants to go into medical school. You will have to do standardized patients as part of your curriculum. So I kind of was on the flip side of that before applying to medical school. Furthermore, I was also, I did scribing as just a general thing. I worked at a pulmonologist office for a while, and I definitely got to see the ins and outs of how EMRs work and how that relates to scribing directly, working under one physician the entire time I was there. And I specifically was exposed to the Epic EMR, which is a very popular electronic medical record that a lot of you may be familiar with or will be exposed to later on in your careers. So that was a good way to get some more face time with patients as well, and also see how the doctor's office works. I also currently work as a literacy mentor with the Center for Success Network. Specifically, they have a lot of locations, but this volunteer organization, which I know has been promoted around Wayne State, is they're an organization for mentors or college students to be paired up with younger elementary age school children to study various subjects as well as do reading skills. So every week I'm paired up with the same student and we do some teaching, and we go through either what he's been learning in class, or we read books and play games and stuff like that. So it's a good opportunity for any of you out there who are interested in teaching. It's a good opportunity to have that time to do it before you get into your next level of your schooling or your careers or wherever you might be going afterward. So it's a good way to kind of connect with community members too, because all of these kids that I work with are directly part of Detroit Public Schools. And then I did, just as a general thing I added on here, I did shadowing. I think it's important to shadow at least a few different specialties if you can prior to applying. It shows medical schools that you're serious about your application and you've done kind of that final step of making sure you've checked in with some of the professionals that you've networked with or maybe reached out to through cold emails or through the university. Maybe there's connections that some of you might have found. And having that variety kind of gives you an idea of what might interest you, and if, medical school and ultimately that sector of the healthcare field is right for you. So that's why I put that on my application as well. For those of you who might not be familiar with the application process, or you're just starting out, you get about, unless they change it up, it should be about 15 slots for the MCAS application. So that's the MD application. So you get 15 slots to put in activities that you have accomplished. So these are just a few of the activities that I put on my application. So that's a little bit about my background. I don't want to spend too much time on that. I kind of want to do, if there's anyone that has questions afterwards, I want to make sure I have plenty of time for that. But I'll just go through my application cycle to give those of you who might not be familiar with it kind of a preview on how it works for applying to medical school. So I was a little different than most people in that I took a very long time to work on my personal statement. I took about a year to write it because I started very early, kind of crafting ideas and brainstorming, and really didn't really flesh out the full personal statement until much closer to application season. But I did spend a lot of time taking down my ideas, and I consider that part of my writing process here. So it wasn't me literally a full year of me writing, but it was me kind of compiling my ideas and logging down what I've done and my activities and kind of my mindset, and kind of getting in touch with what was important to me. And that's a big aspect of the application process, I believe, is that you're really going to find who you are as you go through this process, and you spend all this time writing about yourself and about the people around you who have influenced your life and why you're taking this next step to go to medical school. So I think it's really important for everyone to kind of, check in with yourself constantly and work early so that you don't feel pressured near the end. So that's my reasoning for doing that the way I did with my personal statement. Another thing that I did for my application cycles, I reached out to professors and mentors and other supervisors, relevant individuals in my life who could kind of attest to the activities that I had done and to my character, who knew me well. And so I asked, so just to give a little, back up a little bit here, I did apply the previous application cycle, the 2022-2023 medical school application cycle. So at the beginning of 2022, I started reaching out to prospective letter writers, and I kind of took that time to get those letters locked down so that my writers would have time to write letters that were, you know, well thought out and accurately reflected who I was. And so I think that's a really important step. Is if I could give any advice, would be definitely make sure early on, ask for letters, or kind of zero in on who might be important in your life, who can write for you for your letters, because that's going to be an important aspect that medical schools need to see. I took my MCAT in March of 2022, and I studied about, I want to say it was about 8 months. It wasn't like hardcore 8 hours a day type studying. I was doing full-time classes at the time, but my approach really through all of this has been, it's a marathon, not a sprint. So I kind of have stretched out a lot of my activities and aspects of my application cycle as much as possible so that I didn't feel overwhelmed. Obviously, it's still a lot, regardless of how early or late you start, but starting early gave me that opportunity to kind of stretch things out and keep my stress a little bit lower. And then it takes a month for anyone who doesn't know how the MCAT score release works. After you take the exam, 1 month later, you get your score back. So you're kind of in limbo for that month. So in April of that year, I got my score back. And then, so both, I think they changed it now. I don't think it's a COMAS. I think it's ACOM or something. There's a different name they've changed for the DO application. The MD AMCAS application is still the same. They open, at least for MCAS, opens May 31st of, it was 2022. So, and I believe a COMAS actually opens a little bit earlier than that. The DO cycles, I think it starts a little bit earlier and goes a little bit longer from my understanding. But basically, I was all ready with my primary application that I need to submit, which is my personal statement, my activity section, maybe compiling some of the letters, but you don't necessarily need all those. So I had everything that I initially had ready to submit mid-June. So I think it was like June 11th or something. I submitted all my stuff, which is early on in the cycle since it opens at the end of May. And that's another piece of advice, is try to submit early. The earlier you submit, the better odds you have of getting into a medical school. But obviously take your time and make sure you're happy with your writing before submitting. It's better to still wait a little bit rather than submit on day one, then, you know, give yourself a few weeks like I did, and then submit with writing that you're really happy with. So, hey, Peter, I think your sound's on there. Just checking. Anyway, so next would be the secondary applications. So what happens is, especially for MCAS, really MCAS kind of sets the tone for your application timeline. So it takes about a month for them to receive your application and verify all the components before you receive what are called secondaries, which are your essays that you write specifically tailored to each medical school. And from there, you have more essays that you write and then submit, and then they look at that as a package deal. So the medical school will evaluate your primary essay, your secondary essay, and then decide whether they think you're a good candidate for their school. So about a month later, after submitting my primary, I get my secondary applications, and then I would submit them. And I wrote varied submissions here because it really depends on the timeline. So you kind of, I made a spreadsheet personally, and you kind of line up all the schools you have and the date that you receive them. And you kind of try to not take too long to submit your secondary applications. Sometimes they might have a 2-week window is kind of the recommendation. To be honest, I took a little bit longer than that. I might take up to a month to submit some of mine. So like mid-July, I started writing like mid-July, and then I would go all the way through August and stuff. So some of my stuff I submitted end of July. Some of my stuff for the secondaries I submitted mid-August or something like that. But the earlier, the better. That's the bottom line, is once you have all your components submitted, then the school can officially look at your application. Just to give a kind of an idea of like the breakdown of what I applied to a total of 25 schools, 20 MD schools, 5 DO schools, and I received a total of 9 interview invites. So you kind of see like it's the proportions are quite drastic, so it's good to apply to as many schools as you can. I received 4 DO interviews and 5 MD interviews, but that's a lot. And I didn't really, so I narrowed those down. I only attended 5 of those interviews of the 9 that I got. And of those 5 interviews, I got 4 acceptances and 1 waitlist out of it. So, interviewing and your ability to interview with a school is very important. So take some time for that as well if you're applying. And then just school specific. So since I'm attending OUWB, I completed my secondary, I think it was the end of July. And then I got my interview invite in December of 2022. And then I got my acceptance. I think it was just the first week, a few days after New Year. So the first week in January, I got my acceptance. So here's some advice, and I kind of sprinkled that in a little bit already, but for the application cycle, make sure you take your time, work on your personal statement early. And just so you take some of the burden off and you can really like fine tune your writing and take your time and really have a strong reason as to why you want to apply and convey that well through your writing. Also, I can't stress enough, getting your letters of rec early. I honestly wish with some of the people, I didn't do it as early as January, to get those letters. So I was kind of scrambling near the end to try to clean up some things and make sure I had everyone ready to go to submit their letters that they'd written. So definitely try to do that earlier is better. That's definitely the advice I would give. Just because you don't want to have everything else done and then wait on a letter writer. And I actually had that scenario myself. So you want to make sure that you have all those other little things taken care of. So letters are very important since they involve another person. Make sure you contact them early and make sure you communicate clearly with the letter writers about what you need and what your timeline is. Also, like I said before, submitting your primary application as early as possible because it does take about a month to verify before you receive your secondary applications. So definitely make sure that you apply as early as possible. The later you apply, the statistics are lower that you'll get in. Just so make sure you do that also because a lot of medical schools kind of have a rolling admissions basis, meaning they basically review your application as it comes in and they give admissions out as they review. So they might run out of spaces in their medical school before they even get to your application if you apply very late. So never look at that deadline and say, oh, I have all the way to the end to submit that secondary. Make sure you don't wait to the last second. That's a top priority for sure. If you have time, pre-write your secondaries, meaning you go online, go on to SDN or Reddit, or talk to your friends who have applied and see if you can get what the previous essay prompts were for that specific medical school. Sometimes they change, sometimes they don't, but you can definitely take those essays and start writing before you get verified. So while you're waiting in limbo for that month or whatever that it might take to get verified, you can start writing and then you're prepared and you might be able to submit your secondaries early without having to worry about taking so much time to revise and re-edit all your essays. So if you can do that, but you don't have to, because for example, I didn't, but I think it would have helped if I did. Kind of like I've been saying throughout all of this, the application timelines can kind of vary for every school, and it is kind of unpredictable. You'll have several months where you might be in limbo in terms of hearing from a school. So don't worry about if you don't hear right away, because it does take time. They've got literally thousands of applications that they have to get through. And I do have a breakdown of our school's cycle to show you to kind of highlight that. Another thing, interviews are very important. If they look at your application and they give you an interview invite, that means that on paper you look great and they want to seal the deal and really see who you are. So make sure you kind of practice if you're not kind of up to snuff or comfortable interviewing, and try to practice with friends or mentors, or try to find if they have workshops at the university or something like that that might be helpful. And then look at practice MMI questions. So that's multiple mini interviews, which is a format that's very popular amongst medical schools, where they kind of give you a set number of time, maybe like 5 to 10 minutes to look at a prompt, see like a scenario about maybe, let's say, an ethical dilemma or a time you did like a certain thing. And basically you have that amount of time to answer questions about a prompt. So look up things like that online. There's a lot of free resources that you can use for that. And it's a good way to prepare to kind of get the feel for how an interview will go. And then what I did personally was I made a cheat sheet for my interview day. So I would research the school, and then day of the interview, I have my little cheat sheet on my desk where I kind of have the information written out about things that I want to make sure I bring up in the interview, things like my talking points, things that I've researched about the school that I want to ask about. Always have a list of relevant questions, I think is really important. And just all these things that are, I just think, essential for you to express that you've done the research and show the school that you're interested. So take that time, do that research ahead of time. And for example, I took notes. So during MMIs, if there's a prompt and I want to take little notes about my thoughts and what I was thinking at the, like before they have you answer the prompt, I would take notes on a little notepad. So if that's helpful, I would say go for it. They're not going to have any issue with that. And then the other thing is just don't forget to relax and take breaks. It seems like general advice that people would say all the time, but you can kind of forget and get lost in the shuffle with everything that you've got to complete, and it is very stressful to apply. So make sure you're spacing things out, you're taking breaks, and just taking time for yourself, because it's too much if you don't. A little bit transitioning now, a little bit about the school that I go to. So I go to OUWB, and I just want to say, if there's anyone perspective out there who is applying to this school, I'm going to give you a little insight to see if it seems like a good fit for you. So we are a service-focused medical school. So, for example, my application has no research on it. I didn't do any research in undergrad. I did a lot of other activities, a lot of what I've highlighted already. But those things were big focuses on my application, but research was not a big thing. Certain medical schools are very big on research, so make sure you look into that when you're applying. But OUWB, they're really focused on community service. So if you have a lot of service hours, or have done a lot of work in your community, that would be a really good fit for this school, because there's a lot of continuation. In medical school now, they kind of have a lot of initiatives for us as students to do community service. So that's a big component of our school. But we do have a research and ethics-based curriculum. So even if you don't need, like, if you're like me and you don't have any research background, they have a required research project that you can do at the university here. And you can kind of make it how you will, but there is like a class where you literally learn about research. You learn about biostatistics. You learn about how to read case reports and studies. So just because you might not have done a lot of research in the past, if you're interested in doing research, this school is a good fit for that, because it's very much integrated into the curriculum that we have. Furthermore, speaking a little bit to the ethics. So we have ethics classes in each of our first 2 years. Each semester we have an ethics course, and we do about an hour and a half a week of ethics, where we're presented cases and we have group discussions on ethical dilemmas and scenarios you might encounter in your job, at the hospital, or out in real life. So stuff like that is a big part of our curriculum as well. So if that sort of thing interests you, specifically bioethics, this school is very good for that. And just to give a little background about the teaching hospitals, we are associated with Corewell Health, formerly known as Beaumont Hospitals. So, and the primary hospitals where you'll do most of your learning is Beaumont Troy and Beaumont Royal Oak, which is the main campus. And we have a traditional 4-year curriculum, which is 2 years of preclinical or bookwork, and then 2 years of clinical stuff where you're working at Beaumont Royal Oak or Corewell Royal Oak, where you're learning in the hospital. And it's an organ systems based curriculum for the preclinicals. So you focus on each organ system, you go through the system, and then you move on to the next one. And that's how they break up and organize the curriculum. A lot of medical schools do. It's a very traditional curriculum. There are some other medical schools here in Michigan that don't do that. And if people have questions about that at the end, I'm happy to talk about the other schools that I applied to as well. Here's a little bit about our profile, just so you can kind of see what our class of 2027 was like for the application season. So there were a little over 7,500 applicants in the last year, and almost 400, or sorry, almost 500 interviews that they gave out of that. And the class size is 125 students. That's not changing, so it's going to be 125 for this next cycle and so forth. So it is kind of a steep competition to get in to a medical school. To be honest, this is a little on the low side from some of the other schools that I've seen. Some of the other schools upwards, I've seen, I think one of the schools with the highest number of applicants that I saw, I was 16,500 applicants for one of the schools that I applied to. And then some of the other ones in Michigan, you might have around 11,000 or something for the year that I was applying. So and I anticipate those numbers to stay the same or even go up. So it's going to be a lot of applicants, basically. And this is kind of the breakdown of the majors we've had. So, and biology is by far the most popular. But if you have other degrees, neuroscience, I know is relatively new degree at Wayne State that is kind of up and coming. So that's still quite popular for a lot of these degrees. And then you can see the other breakdowns for the other degrees as well. And here are our breakdowns and demographics. If you're curious about that, you can look through the recording as well. And then we have where all of our students are from as well. Since OUWB is a private institution, we don't discriminate on students in state versus out of state. So we get a lot of students from other states. And actually this year, I mean, we're a little over half from Michigan, but still a lot of the friends you'll make are people from out of state. Moving on, some of the stuff that I believe are the best resources at OUWB that have really been useful to me at my time so far. Scholarships is going to be the big one first off. So I will highlight that of all the schools I have applied to, OUWB is the most transparent about scholarships. And frankly, they have some of the biggest scholarships out there for any Michigan medical school. So that's it's a big driving factor for a lot of people applying, just because, as we all know, with the tuition prices and the cost of everything nowadays, it is a lot, and a lot of people take out loans, and they're very high interest rates. So scholarships are a big factor that they have to help students out, and a lot of students do receive scholarships, and they do have. I think we just have another scholarship application open up, so students can compete for even more funds that they have. Also, the technology. So OUWB provides all students with a MacBook, laptop, Apple Pencil, iPad, backpack, and stuff to carry it in. So everyone's on the same equal playing field with the technology they give, and so it's kind of a seamless transition to taking online notes, storing all your notes. You don't have to do paper for anything. It's very much the curriculum's integrated, so it's easy to use all Apple products. Which for me has been very helpful. So I think that's just a nice little bonus that's part of your tuition. I think the medical library, and this goes for any medical school, I think, but I would say, but medical library has been particularly helpful. Here's a picture of one of our collaboration rooms in the medical library. They have all the textbooks that you might need if you actually want to check out a hardcover textbook. They have that available. They have models for things like organs or bones or things that you want to look at. Collaboration study rooms. They also have in this door over here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there is a quiet study space as well as individual rooms with swipe cards that are all locked so your stuff can be secured. And there's a bunch of whiteboards to do writing. So if you want to do group study, so it's a good place. And the technology experts and the data information experts that work in the library are all very helpful for your research projects or your class projects or any questions you have. You can rent out iPads and other like anatomy apps, for example, for your studying or other things that are helpful. So there's just been a lot of good resources there that's helpful. They even have a Meta Quest VR headset that people can use for studying and check out of the library. So they've got all sorts of little things that are helpful for students. Another big selling point for our school is our anatomy lab. We have what's considered a full donor body dissection. So we spend our first semester. So what I did last semester was you spend the full 4.5 months, 5 months, basically dissecting the entire human body and going through each organ system as like a foundation and seeing that from start to finish. And you do all the cuts yourself. You get like really acquainted with the anatomy and how everything comes together. A lot of other schools have what's called prosection, so dissection is already done for you. But this is very much hands-on. You do it yourself, and with assistance from professors if you have questions. But it's very much if you're an independent, if you a hands-on learner and want to see everything from scratch, we offer that, and that's available. And we have a very state-of-the-art lab, and I do have some pictures to show you as well of that. I think mental health services are really important for any medical school, and we offer 100% free counseling anytime students want, unlimited sessions for the entire time, all 4 years that you're in, which I think is a big selling point for a lot of places. So I would just say if you're into mental health or getting tips and tricks from the counselors for other things for studying or just talking out, whatever you got going on, that's a great service that I think is really helpful for a lot of students. Another thing is our Big Sib, Little Sib program. A lot of schools have this as well, but I think it's been very helpful for me having a Big Sib. So basically what happens is when you come in as a first year, you apply to this program and you get paired up with another individual who has similar interests as you, maybe similar background based on how you fill out the application. And they basically help you out. They're a year above you and they help you out with all like getting into like a transition of how to study, any questions you have about medical school, and basically make your medical school transition easier. Just another picture here. This is our microbiology lab here that we do occasional labs in as well. So just another little sneak peek there. So here's our anatomy lab. Another big selling point is you'll find that a lot of school tours that you go on, if they have anatomy labs, they're usually in a basement and there's usually no windows, and you wouldn't believe it, but that makes a big difference. So we're on a 3rd floor. We've got plenty of windows and light. So honestly, it kind of keeps morale up, and it's just like it's a good, nice, big open space to work in. It doesn't feel cramped. And we're all tricked out we've got Apple computers on every single workstation here, so you don't have to bring in any paperwork. You can do all your dissection procedures. You'll see right here on our computers. They provide you with your textbooks if you need to reference things, but you can also Google if you need to look up something, a structure or whatever. And you can see right here, we have all of our donors here. So you're assigned a lab group, and basically you work with that group for the entire semester, and you dissect this individual who donated their body to science. So it's a good way to get initiated into medical school, get used to that anatomy and used to seeing how everything connects and kind of translates from your books that you're learning simultaneously in class to actually doing a lab every week. And you do, on average, I would say, maybe 4 to maybe 8 hours a week on average in lab. You'll spend some time. So it's a significant amount of time you're going to spend working through this curriculum. Let's see. So next I have just a little background on the medical school experience from the academic side first. So just to give you an idea of what I've done so far, our first semester is 60 credit hours. So you might think, well, what's the average undergraduate credit hours? I think 12 is full-time, and some people might go up to like 20 or something like that. So it is a lot that you're going through here. But they break it down in a way that is manageable, and you really just get used to the transition as you go through. It's just one of those things where you feel like you're drinking through a fire hose, but you kind of sift through the information. You learn what works best for you for studying and how to prepare for your exams. So it's traditional exam format, but basically you have monthly exams. So you have about a month to study material, and then you take a midterm, a month to study material, final exam, and then you move on to the next class. So in 2 months, you've done a whole class and they move on. So that's how they can have such a high credit number here. And like I mentioned earlier, we have a weekly anatomy lab. But that's only for the first semester. So now I'm in the second semester. We don't do anatomy lab anymore. We've got other microbiology labs and pathology, histology labs, but those aren't as frequent. So you have a lot more time to yourself to study. But this was the first semester. So, and then you have still in the first semester, you have the occasional microbiology, histology, pathology lab. But it's a standard lecture curriculum and with written exams, and there are practical exams as well. So if you're not familiar with that, it's like you see anatomy structure, you go into the lab, you have 60 seconds to look at the structure, and then you write down what you think it is, and then you move on to the next structure and the next structure, and they time you. And that by the end of your full exam, you've done all the structures that they wanted to assess you on, and that's another component of your exam. And I can answer questions about that if anyone has questions at the end. The current semester I'm in right now is now organ systems. So the first semester was foundational, and that's why it was set up like that. So you can kind of get like a broad overview, umbrella of everything. And now we're getting in the nitty gritty. So we start with our organ system, and then once we complete our first one, we move on to the next one, and it continues like that for the rest of the preclinical curriculum. Just to give you a context, it's 37 credit hours, but it doesn't feel like less work because, it's just different kind of format is all. And then we have other courses as well. So you have your foundational, like clinically relevant courses, but then you're also given other courses that kind of tie in, and they're longitudinal because they last the entire semester, while the other foundational classes are quick, 2 months. For the 4 or 5 months, you've got these other courses going on, and we have the same thing the second semester as well. I have what's called PMH right here. So that's promotion and maintenance of health. So you learn about health disparities, health and community, basically. MHCB is medical humanities and clinical bioethics, and that's your ethics course that you take. PRISM is a mentoring program where we're paired up with a physician mentor, and we have a small group sessions where we talk about mentorship and kind of wellness and health and well-being, stuff like that. APM is art and practice of medicine. This is what they call their doctoring course, meaning hands-on working with patients. And this is where you will work with standardized patients. So the kind of the work that I did before, this is kind of like the flip side of it. So you're a student, you are being evaluated by the standardized patient, you do physical exams on these patient actors. And that's a whole nother course that you have. And then also we have Embark, which is our research project. So it's a longitudinal research project, and it's a course where you learn how to basically do research or continue research that you find interesting if you've already done research in the past. And then just to give you an idea, the breakdown is a honors pass fail curriculum, and we have internal quartile rankings. So based on kind of your class rank, how you do, whether you pass, fail, or honor courses, that kind of shifts where you are in the ranking system, and that will then be submitted for residency applications. So kind of the more competitive you are, the more you basically honor your classes. But other than that, it's just like a pass. There's no A, B, C, D grades or anything like that. And the exams are professor written. And if anyone has questions about that, I can certainly talk in depth later about that as well. Here's just a sample schedule, just to kind of give you an overview. This was actually last week, so you can see. So here is a week timeline, and here is a single day of that week broken down. So you can see everything's from 8 to 5. Everything's pretty much done, blocked off. Obviously, you need your own time to study. And to be honest, some of these things are lectures that you can do on your own. So every lecture is recorded. It's optional whether you want to attend or not. So you can study on your own, however you get the material studied. And then you have a few mandatories. So you might have a lab. I believe we had a histology lab and then a pathology lab. And then sometimes we have in-person like research and ethics, and our doctoring course, standardized patients, you go to the hospital for that. So there are other things that you do in person, but for the lectures, you can do those on your own time. This is just a breakdown for you to see. And then for the personal side of things, from my experience, I mean, adjusting to the transition was very big, kind of establishing my study habits, figuring out my commute. So I commute a fair distance to school, so factoring that in, and learning time management with that and just how it's different than undergrad. And then just making connections with new friends, my other peers, my professors, and the clinicians that we work with. So just adjusting to all that. And then I also, since I kind of mentioned it earlier, but my current volunteer work, so I still volunteer at that community clinic, and I do mentoring online for Detroit Public Schools still. And then I do pre-health mentoring through Oakland University as well. So there's a few things that I'm doing now, but early on, this is, it's early in my education. So definitely spend some time, adjusting first before diving into a bunch of stuff like clubs and whatnot. And then just making time, for friends, family, relationships, whatever stuff you have going on. That's just the other side of things as well. Make sure you have time to balance. It's really important. And then a few tips just to give you. So prior to med school, do what you enjoy in undergrad. Don't try to check all the boxes. Obviously, there's certain things that you kind of need like as soft requirements for applications, but just kind of focus on what's important to you. Everyone's got a different journey. Everyone's got a different story. Focus on that because it will come through with your writing, especially when you convey that. It's like if you talk about something that you really love, they're going to see that passion. The school is going to be very aware of who you are when you convey that and when you do things that you enjoy. Try to find a variety of mentors, really try to diversify your background, try to network with some of the professors. There's so many great professors at Wayne State. A lot of mentors that I got from Wayne State. So definitely try to expand your circle and see what you can learn from people outside the classroom, because there's just so much that you can do outside of just classroom traditional learning. And then this is kind of, I think, just helpful for the application, but also for, yourself, writing about your experiences. Whether you journal or not, it might be helpful to kind of track down these experiences early and track your hours as well as other things, so that when it comes time for you to apply, if you are interested in applying, you're ready to go, and you kind of know what your big meaningful activities were, what's most important to you, and kind of like why medicine, like why do you want to go into medical school and be a physician ultimately. So and I thought it was helpful for me to do that. Also, just make sure you research your schools. It's really a big thing. I would definitely give that advice to anyone who's applying. Make sure you really look into what school you're applying to, what their mission is, and kind of compare it to your own application. There's some schools I applied to that I don't really think I had a great fit for, and there's other schools, obviously, I had a very good fit for. So make sure you do that research, because then you're more likely, to get an interview invite and ultimately accepted to a school that kind of fits the mission that lines up with your application, basically. If you haven't already, just to try it out, try out Anki for some of your classes. If you have like a heavy memorization class, something where you got like, I don't know, histology, immunology, things where you have like a lot of little things to memorize, try it out just to see if you like it. And I think it's a good idea early to try it out, because in med school, you don't want to try to be trying out for the first time. A lot of med students, if you don't know, use Anki for a lot of their studying for rote memorization and spaced repetition. And it's helpful for a lot of students, but it's not for everyone. So if you use your undergrad time to try to figure out what kind of your study pattern is and your plan, that kind of helps a little bit down the road. So that's just a big thing I would check out just to see. And then don't study if you're accepted, if you're fortunate enough to get an acceptance, take that time off if you can, or work or do something else that's not like study, like school related, because there's no amount of studying that could possibly prepare you for all the material you're going to get. So take your time, relax if you can. And also just prioritize your health. It's really important. And I figure, everyone should say that all the time, because it is so important. And ironically, it's often put in the back burner, I would say. And then advice for medical school. Definitely utilize your resources whenever you can. I just shared some of the things that were most valuable to me at the school. Everyone's different. And also, talking to my friends, what things that they enjoyed. Just trying to figure out, what's best in terms of school, like how they can help you, because they want you to be there. They want you to be there, and basically they want to do whatever they can to help you, because they've invested all this time in you, getting you there. They want to see you succeed. Another thing is, if you go to a school that has a big SIB, little SIB program, make sure you're really detailed and specific when you're filling out your application, because they ask you a bunch of questions about basically to get an idea of who you are. And then they use that to pair you up with someone else. And the more that you write, the more they can find you someone who's a really good fit and very much on the same page as you and help you out. So, and that's a little more of a niche thing, but I found it very helpful. Also, just having a good support system is really important. Whether if you move far away for medical school and you can, contact them, your friends or family frequently, or working to establish a community at your school, whatever it takes to kind of build a nice support network. That's really crucial, I think, and it's been crucial for me to do well in school. And then making sure to take time off just to relax and recharge. I think it's just so important that you balance. You're not going to spend a full maybe 8 hours a day studying. Like it might not be realistic for someone to do that. So make sure you take some time to relax or recharge, whatever that might be. Try to keep some hobbies, and it just makes the transition a little bit easier, I think. Also, just on the same token, you can get involved in stuff like clubs or interest groups or volunteering, shadowing, but don't overextend yourself. So especially early on in the school process, just try to get school down first and figure out that transition. It'll just make things easier later on. And then make sure you try to plan early if you can. If you're fortunate enough to get acceptance a little bit earlier, plan for living arrangements, figure out if you're going to commute or not, whether or not that affects your time management, and establishing your routine, what you kind of want involved. Like that's going to be like early in med school. That's what's a lot of it's going to be, is establishing what routine and what study pattern works for you. And just always be aware, and this is going to be throughout your entire career as a learner. Avoid resource overload. A lot of people are going to say, try this, try this. I'm telling you things that worked for me. There's all these different resources out there. You kind of have to sift through that and figure out what works for you and what might not. And it's okay. It's good to try things out and then shed them off if they don't work for you. But at least you tried. So that way you can kind of see what's going on. But just because your friends might be doing things a little differently doesn't mean you have to do it that way. And finally, don't worry about every little detail when studying. It's not the same as undergrad, where you might need to know every little thing to pass a test, because you don't get A, B, C, D grades. It's a little different. So you kind of have to prioritize what's high yield, what's most important, what's most effective. And then it kind of helps you sift through what your study pattern is going to be like. And I can certainly answer more questions about that. Just closing off here. This is my Q&A, and here's some topics that if anyone it jogs your memory of anything we talked about that you find interesting. This is a long time for me to talk. I'm good with being done talking. I'm more about, if there's any sort of discussion or anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to present today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris, for that very deep, detailed, and in-depth exploration into your pre-med and your med school experiences. We do have a couple questions in the chat. The first question was, for shadowing, how many hours is usually preferred?
Okay, shadowing, I would say a good number is right around 100. I'd say would be pretty good, but really don't do one. I would say just do several different shadowing experiences and lump that into your 100 hours. If you do less than 100, that's fine. I probably wouldn't say too much less than 50 though, just to try to show that you've kind of, you've had a fair amount of exposure. I just think it's kind of important, even though it might seem like 100 hours might seem like a lot, but I just think it's a good, nice round number to kind of give you, let's say you do like 4 or 5 different specialties, or maybe even more. Maybe just do like a few hours on like 10 specialties or something. I mean, that's a lot. That's like a lot of different specialties, but just to say, just try to, and all lump those into one spot in your application. Out of your 15 slots, one spot is shadowing, and you can list out all of what you did if you did X number of specialties.
Awesome. And so just as a corollary to that, if let's say somebody has like several hundred or 1,000 something, hours with clinical experience actually working as, let's say, a medical assistant or something, how important is shadowing at that point? Does it still make a difference if you don't have any shadowing hours on your application, or is that something you would still recommend to definitely, add to your application?
I think that's a little more unique situation. So I think it shouldn't be too much of a problem. The only thing I would say is just encourage an individual like that to maybe look at least 1 or 2 specialties that are different from the work that they might be doing in their either paid or unpaid clinical work, just to show that they've kind of broadened their horizons a little bit about what medicine might be like.
Okay. Thank you. And another question was it overwhelming to trying to apply for both DO and MD schools?
Um, I don't think that was particularly overwhelming. I think the sheer volume of just the number of schools that you apply to is overwhelming. So I think the recommendation is the average applicant applies to about 16 schools. That statistic might have changed. So I went a little bit above that. I was fortunate enough to get the fee assistance program. If anyone doesn't know about that, that's really important to apply to. Even if you don't think you qualify, try to apply because you get 20 medical schools for free. So all of my MD schools were free to apply. But the DO application timeline is more stretched out than MD. Everything kind of revolves around MD in terms of timelines. So they're a little more strict in terms of when to apply and how much time you have to apply. DO, you can apply a little bit later in the cycle without the same kind of consequences. The probability of you getting in might be still a little bit higher. And the applications are pretty similar, so don't really worry about navigating things being so much different. They're very similar. I think DO, I think it's like an unlimited number of spots you can do, but I wouldn't do more than the 15 or whatever, like different activities and stuff like that. But the applications are very, very similar. By the way, if anyone has follow-up questions to anything that I'm answering, if they want something more in depth, or if I didn't quite answer their question, feel free to pop in and let me know as well, because I'm happy to go into more depth. This is very generalized what I'm saying right now.
Yeah, so a follow-up to that is and sorry, my video was cutting in and out in the beginning of your presentation, but I know you were talking about rolling admissions for MD schools. Is it the same way with DO schools too?
By and large, from my understanding, many are. I'm not sure the breakdown of exactly how many schools are not rolling admissions, but quite a few are for both MD and DO. Yeah.
Cool. And another question from the chat is, what is the difference between the MCAS and a COMAS? Is it two different accounts that we make, or is it all in one?
Two different accounts. AMCAS is MD, ACOMAS is DO. Like I said, I think they changed the acronym now. I don't think for you guys it is ACOMAS anymore, but it's some variation of that. But yeah, just MD versus DO, two separate accounts. But like I said, the navigation and the way they're laid out is pretty similar. There's a few minor differences, but by and large, it shouldn't be much of a problem. You just kind of have to track both of them and log in, have them bookmarked two separate pages. Okay. I think I'll just, since it looked like he hopped out there, or maybe had a little cutout there, I'll read, I guess, the next thing that I see in the chat here. Any tips on writing personal statements or elevating your statement? Yeah. So, and I'm happy to talk more specifics, but I will say that for when it comes to personal statements, beyond what I said, just like writing things early, like writing things down, take like a little notebook or something. Like, let's say you have a clinical volunteering or any volunteering job, whatever you do that you think is meaningful, like what might go on your application, really maybe take a notebook one day, or just notes app on your phone. I mean, I'm a little more old fashioned about that sort of thing, but whatever works, like, and write down, maybe you have like a really good patient experience, or your really good volunteering experience, or something that really stands out in your work, and you think of it, just immediately, like in notes app, like write it down, and take that time to kind of, so you don't forget, because you might try to recall details later. I know that's a big thing. It's like, I'll be like, okay, what happened a year ago that was really interesting to me, and I want to write down like this clinical story or something like that. And you just don't get all the details right. So a good way is just fresh, like write it down when you can, when you're, like it's fresh to you. So that would be one big tip. And then have other people read your personal statement, not too many, and be really selective on who you choose. Someone who maybe has more of a writing background, a friend who maybe isn't doing medicine and has a very different perspective. Talk to someone like that. I think that's really important for me personally. I believe, I mean, my background was poli-sci, I did a lot of writing and stuff. So to me, it was important to get individuals who had a background that was completely removed from medicine to see if they kind of got the same message that someone like myself might get when I'm reading my own essay, because you can get really, steeped in what you're writing and you might kind of lose yourself a little bit. So you might say, oh, is this good? I don't know anymore. Or is this like, do I need to change this? And you kind of become really biased. So the best way to kind of remove some of that bias from your writing is to have other people look at it and give you feedback early enough so that you can make necessary changes. I have quite a bit that I could say about personal statements because I do enjoy writing, and I think like it's a really big part of the application. Because I'll tell you, like my stats were not crazy, and I did not have any research. But I think my interviews and the way that I wrote was really like a key feature for me getting into the schools that I got into. And I mean, all my interviews went well. So I would just say I'm happy to answer more if that's too generalized. But those are some of the big things that I think have been helpful for me for application for writing. It's really important, and your essays too, for your secondaries. That's another thing.
So another question about, since you were just bringing up the research, in terms of, the schools that you applied to, you got interviews at all of them without any research on your application. Could you share maybe like which, schools accepted you or gave you interviews or accepted you without any
Absolutely.
research?
Absolutely. So let's see. Oakland University, obviously, Central Michigan University, MSU, both MD and DO. So that's MSU Com and MSU CHM. Let's see. Marion University in Indiana for DO, Chicago College of Osteopathic Medicine. Um, let's see, Carl, Illinois School of Medicine. Trying to think. I think I covered all of them. Yeah, I think those are all the ones that gave me interviews.
I'm guessing U of M is very research heavy, so they probably would look at a app with no
They
research
rejected
on it
my
again.
application right off. I'll tell you that right now. Yep. Yep. They're very research heavy. I'm going to be very transparent about that. I think you need good research. I've talked to a lot of impressive people who applied and or got accepted there, and yeah, they had good, strong undergraduate research background. Important.
So how much of a difference do you think it makes to the application if you start your research like just shortly before applying?
Well, I guess it depends on how meaningful it is and how well you can talk about it. Even if you only have maybe like a couple hundred, let's say you have a couple hundred hours of research, and I mean research processes varies, so some people might produce some deliverable, like, but publishing, takes so long, depending on what your area of focus. But if you can get a poster presentation, a conference out of it, abstracts, things like that are important for your CV, and they follow with you. So I think if you can put that on an application, that's really good. But if you can talk about your work meaningful, even if you didn't produce any deliverables out of that, if you can speak to it and you say, you know what, this is the kind of research I like. I like, let's say, working with eyes, for example, and I want to continue that, and you show like that's the kind of your theme that goes with a lot of the other stuff you've done in your application. I think if you build kind of a theme and you kind of the way you convey it, that kind of sells it regardless of how much you've produced. And I will say, another thing is that, I mean, just because of what I did and the nature of how I kind of was in undergrad, I didn't really think about research and didn't really add that to my application. But I highly recommend anyone who wants to get into research, who's interested, do it because it follows you your entire academic career. So on your residency application, you can put that research down if it was relevant to you later on. So it's a good stepping stone. And there's a lot of things like that's on my application now that I don't think I can put down for my residency application. And that kind of makes a difference in how competitive you are as well. So I would say if you're interested, check it out. It doesn't hurt.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we're wrapping up our time. I don't know how much time you have, but if anybody has any last minute questions for Chris, go ahead and you can unmute yourself or throw them in the chat real quick.
Absolutely. I have a few minutes, so I'm fine to do that. And especially since I'm kind of talking to a screen the whole time, I don't know if I'm really answering everyone's questions, if that was like in depth enough. So please, if someone wants something more specific, I'm happy to talk about little things. Or give other little tidbits of more niche advice if you have more specific questions. I know these presentations can all kind of sound the same over time too, so.
So a question from the chat is, not sure if Oakland recommends taking the Casper. When would we usually apply to take that?
I'm pretty sure Oakland, I can't remember if it's Casper or Preview. Oh, that's the other thing. Thank you for bringing that up. So you have to take, for most schools statistically that you apply to, you're going to have to take, it's called the Casper test. And obviously the person who asked it knows about what it is, but for those who don't, it's basically like a quick video response and short answer, kind of like, here's a scenario, what would you do in this scenario? And then they rate your responses and give you a score, and then they send that score to schools. Um, there's two tests. There's Casper and there's Preview. They're both basically the same, but one's through MCAS and one's through a different testing company. And basically, in terms of timeline, they kind of give you that time. I think I took it like, I want to say it was such a minor part of my application, honestly. It's like it's just you'll have time near the end. I think pretty sure I submitted my primaries already and I took it, I want to say, or maybe it was I think it was like slightly before my primary application. So like in the summer, in like early summer, I took it. But they give you that timeline. They'll send you emails. So when you register for MCAS or COMAS, oh, COMAS won't, but MCAS is going to say, hey, here's the preview exam. Here's the slots that are open. Sign up for a test date. You take it all online. It's not somewhere you have to go anywhere. It is the preview was proctored, so there's going to be an online proctor through your screen, but they send you out that information like a timeline so that you'll have plenty of time. So because to be honest, now I'm thinking about it, I can't remember the exactly when I took it, but there was plenty of time, and you don't need to, you take like a few days to prepare ahead of time for it, but it's not anything that you need to purchase any books for or anything like that. Some people will try to sell you on that stuff. I personally don't think you need to. I think it's kind of an afterthought, like a last minute thing. And the scores don't really matter. Like I didn't get top scores on it. Like I think I got like a 70th percentile for one of them. And I mean, that seems like what, like a low, like a C minus or whatever, but that doesn't matter, like, I mean, you get into school, so don't worry, they'll tell you about the timelines. It also costs a few extra dollars, just so you're aware as well. It's an extra fee that you have to pay. I'm not sure if anyone else has questions. I will just mention this really quick because it happens to be on my desk. Something that this is a little more niche, but if you get into med school, most students you'll see will have this little game pad here. It's a little clicker that you can use for your Anki cards. So basically you can click through them faster. I don't know how many of you on this call might have done Anki before, but basically it's very efficient to saving you time when you study. And honestly, it makes a big difference than just pressing a keyboard. You'd think it wouldn't, but it does, and a lot of students use it. Once again, it's a little more ahead of the game, a little more niche kind of thing, like piece of advice, but just something that like people buy. Like it's all about efficiency. When you get to med school, it's all about saving as much time as you can so you can hang out and with your friends and do other stuff. So it's not all about study. Make sure you block off that time for other stuff.
I actually have a question about that. So kind of funny. I have that
Yeah.
remote and it does yours disconnect ever? Because like mine reconnect. And I've been like struggling with that. And I've seen that like it disconnects a lot for people. I don't know if it's just mine or
you have the 8-bit Duo. It's the same brand.
yeah, same exact one.
Okay. I think maybe it has something to do with the Bluetooth connection. There are some things you can look up online where usually they say that for resetting Bluetooth, you can just power off and update, turn on airplane mode, turn off, like update your settings and stuff. I mean, I'm using right now, this is the MacBook that Oakland provides me, and the connection's been good. It's a new computer, everything's strong. So in that regard, I haven't had any issues with disconnection. So there's nothing really on the devices side of things that have been an issue for me personally.
Okay, awesome.
But,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, I've actually seen
That's
people
awesome.
using those, and I've been like heavy into Anki. So where did you guys get those? Like, can you just get them off Amazon or?
Yeah, off of Amazon. That's great if you're using it already. That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
Yeah.
what do
great.
I search? Just 8-bit Duo or?
Yeah, 8-bit Duo. I'm sure it's like $20 on Amazon or something like that.
Yeah, you can just search on
Awesome.
remote and it's the first one that comes up.
Oh yeah.
For 20
Yeah.
bucks.
Anki remote.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. But yeah, if there's no more
sure.
questions, then is there anywhere that we could reach you if we have any more questions, Chris?
Absolutely. I'll put in the chat, and I don't know if this is something I wish I could do. The recording probably doesn't show the chat though, does it? Or will it, you know, with the I'm not sure. Now, if you're putting it on YouTube, you probably won't be able to see that, but I'll put in the chat my email, my school email.
I can also put it in like the caption of like the YouTube post. If it
Yeah,
doesn't.
perfect.
Oh, yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, if you can put it in the description, just do that. I will put it here as well. Let's see, let me put it. Okay. So yeah, there's my school email. Feel free, honestly, if you have any questions at all, if anyone who's seeing this video, because I know it's really it's convenient, honestly, to sometimes not be, especially if this is a time where you want to relax or you're studying or whatever, and you're watching this on YouTube. Feel free to shoot me a message. I'm happy to take the time to answer any questions. I want everyone's transition to be smooth to medical school. And there's a lot of stuff I learned that I wish people told me. And there's a lot of things that I learned from talking to people. So I think this club is great. It's very helpful. I think all the shadowing opportunities and the personalities that you meet through this can be really helpful for your own educational career down the line. So absolutely feel free to reach out at any time. I'm happy to always provide things in depth and lots of details. I always feel like stuff like this is very general, but there's a lot of specifics that I can certainly get into if anyone ever wants to know.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate your time, and man, I feel like we have to have you come back just for like a separate Q&A session.
Absolutely,
All.
anytime. I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to do it anytime. Thank you again, everyone. Glad you could tune in.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a good night.
All right. Have a good night.